I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Okay, roll call, please.
Khan,
Here.
Frost,
Here.
Huntsman here, Lewandowski,
Here.
McLaughlin,
Absent, approved.
okay, Merlo,
Here.
Rizzo.
Here.
Okay. Approval of the agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda as submitted for April 15th, 2024.
My second.
All those in favor of approving the agenda of April 15, 2024 as submitted, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Public comment. Okay, none. Person comment? None. New business items. Salem RV Storage, number 24-002, site plan approval.
Would you like to report?
Sure. Brief.
This is a pretty simple site plan. This is an existing developed site at the corner of 7 Mile and Curry. There is, as many of you are probably aware, an existing RV storage facility there. That was approved, I think, in '85 and then updated again in the late '90s or early 2000s. That is not part of what is being proposed here. There's no change to the RV storage. There are a number of buildings on the site. They're removing one of those buildings and replacing it with another building. The size of the replacement constituted a site plan that has to go in front of the planning commission. So we've gone back and forth with the applicant a couple of times on a couple of site plan iterations. They have submitted something now that is ready for your action. The total new building that they're proposing, I believe, is like 10,000 square feet after the building is removed and replaced. They have indicated that this is for storage. It doesn't appear to be commercial storage at this time, but storage is a permitted use in the industrial district. So, like I said, pretty simple site plan. They've included the 6 parking spaces that will be required for the space. In the future, if they were to bring some other use in there, they would have to go through a zoning compliance to ensure that whatever use was being put in there would be acceptable. There's no change to the circulation. They did not provide a landscaping plan per se, but there is existing landscaping around that could provide what is required by the zoning ordinance. So that's something the planning commission has to make a determination on, that the existing vegetation is sufficient to provide that green belt buffer that's required along the roadway. They did provide a lighting plan. One item that we want to see cleaned up is there are 2 fixtures shown on the plan. One shows a lens that would be like a full throw lens, albeit words escaping me, fractured, diffused. But that's not permitted. They have to have a full shield, fully down directed. So we just want to see that piece taken off of the site plan. Otherwise, the grading and drainage was reviewed by our engineering, and there were no comments. And we additionally had a clean review come from the fire marshal. So those are the comments that I have. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. The applicants are here as well.
Where are the applicants? Is that you guys?
It's the blue shirt team.
We just counted on this.
No, I can come sit with you guys.
Hey, you're supposed to be on our side. Okay. Did the township engineer see anything?
Nope, no comments from the township engineer.
Did they review it?
They did review it,
Okay,
yes, yep.
okay. Any questions?
Pardon?
Do you have any questions? So it looks like you guys just have a few things to clean up. Lighting. Any trees gonna be removed?
No,
There aren't that many trees over there, are
just the few you see right in the corner.
there? In the corner there, yeah. That's where the deer like to sneak out, run out in the road. I don't.
Remove all trees.
Yeah. Just administrative things as far as I can see. Anything you wanted to say? No?
No, I will remove that extra fixture on the cut sheet so that it's nice and clean. That's easy enough to do, just
We take our lighting pollution very seriously around here. Yes?
I was going to ask, what building is coming down? I'm looking at the pictures and
the smaller white building right in front.
If you look at our site plan report, there's a aerial image on page 2. And you can see the little blue box is around that northernmost portion of the building.
well, that's on page 3 though.
Oh, 3, I'm sorry.
But it looks like, is that the building that's coming down?
That's going to be removed and it's going to be squared off basically with the building behind it. So it'll be replaced in that same space, just a little bit wider.
Okay.
Is there a bathroom in that existing building?
Yes. And we'll be putting a new unisex toilet back in its place.
All ADA happiness?
Yes.
I don't have any questions. Okay. Anybody else? Last call?
Just out of curiosity, does it feed to the same septic field?
Yes. Same location in the building and everything, so it's tied right there.
Thank you.
Yes.
Did the plumbing permit, you guys acquired the plumbing permit yet?
But we haven't submitted for any building permits yet.
Oh, okay,
That'll all come after site plan approval.
okay. I seen it on Stantec's paper. Okay.
Okay.
See the need for any more landscaping?
No.
Place it's
No.
nicely set back, it looks
Well,
good.
it's just improvement on the property.
Yeah, fits in the building.
Um, Did you provide us the,
I did not. That's simple motion to approve with the condition that they address the outstanding item would be fine.
okay. We have, somebody make a motion. I'll be right out, I've got a half written.
I'll make a motion.
Okay,
Motion to approve Salem RV Storage, number 24-002 as submitted, pending the amended site plan,
meeting all the planning,
meeting all the planning recommendations
to approve on administrative.
to be approved on administrative review.
That's lovely.
Second?
Okay.
Yeah.
Good job, guys. Okay, all those in favor of approving site plan 24-002, based upon meeting all the planners' recommendations and going through the administrative review process, we'll do a roll call vote. Sorry, I just tripped you up there.
Khan?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes.
Huntsman, yes. Lewandowski?
Yes?
Merlot?
Yes.
Rizzo.
Yes.
Okay, the site plan is approved.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, guys.
Well, good evening.
You can hang out, you know.
Snow.
Okay. New business items. We are going to, where's Bruce? Bruce. Did you want to introduce, since you're on the reservation?
Okay, I'm more centered here. So this evening, we have actually Chris Olson and David Lawson to present what we've been asking for, to get some help from them, looking at our ordinances that revolve around our natural features protection, which are woodlands, wetlands, and some of our interconnected areas for natural habitat. We've looked at a couple of ordinances from other communities that seem to fit a lot of what we're looking for. And of course, the key thing, anything that we do in ordinances has to be very defendable and thorough, so that we're all able to clearly hold people accountable for that in site plans and whatnot. So it's got to be something that we can work with inside the office as well. So Chris is here to do a presentation, overall presentation on some of the stuff that we've been looking at. So we have a little background of this as these come up, as the opportunity in your schedule comes up to look at these and start bringing them to a higher level and hopefully pass them.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me. Can everybody see the screen there? Great, well, thanks for having me. I'm Chris Olson. I work at the Huron River Watershed Council, and I've been there for 32 years. And I have three of my coworkers here. David Lossing, who's our Government Relations Director, new occupation at the Watershed Council. We're excited about that. And Andrea Payne works in also with governments. What is your title, Andrea?
I'm a program coordinator.
Program coordinator. And Kate Laramie is associate ecologist, but also taking on a new title, which is?
Also a program coordinator, but
okay.
ecologist.
Yeah. So we've got government, we've got planning, we've got ecology going on. And the reason we're all here is that I will be retiring in May, so that when I leave, these three will be kind of taking on a lot of what I will be talking about today. And I think most of you are familiar with the Watershed Council and what we do. This is a particular project that we have funding for the next 3 years to do work on, which is help local governments, provide resources to local governments regarding land protection, especially as it relates to water quality protection. And so a lot of the things that we've been working with local governments on is providing ways to get funds to actually protect land outright, and then also to develop policies that will protect land, through your ordinances. And so I wanted to let you know that, we have funding to provide staff support like that. And so what we want to be able to promote is the idea that local governments do have the power to protect land in those two ways, and also in terms of partnering with all the different conservancies and other programs. And I know you've had various conservancies and land protection agencies up to Salem Township in the past, so I know that that you have a interest in it. And just a little bit of a slideshow before I get to some of the details is just from another project that I work on called Forest to My Faucet. We are learning all about and working with landowners that have natural area lands like forests and wetlands, the importance of those natural areas specifically for water quality, not only because of course they provide habitat and they provide shade and air quality and recreation, but directly impacting water quality. And in terms of impacts of forest cover on water treatment costs. So if you had a municipal well or municipal source water area like the city of Ann Arbor and Barton Pond, studies have been done that take a look at all the different areas around the country that have municipal water supplies, and they look at the area, the watershed area that goes into that. The more forested land they have, the cheaper it is to treat their water, or some cases, they don't even have to treat their water. And that's not really gonna happen here anymore. But, and so there's a direct effect. And so what I've been talking about a lot in my career is we want to protect those natural areas. And the best way to ensure water quality is to protect what we have, right? So pollution, what is it? Prevention, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? So it's a lot cheaper to protect what we have, either through policies or through funding land protection, than it is to fix it once we've already put in the pavement and the rooftops and the turf grass. And so the way I like to look at it is like a pyramid. So we want to protect what we have. When we do have development, because we do need development, reduce the amount of impact in the beginning when you're planning out the project. So don't pave as much area, use compact development scenarios, group things together. And then when you do build it out, of course, it's going to have an impact. And so using human-made green infrastructure to reduce that polluted runoff. So having rain gardens, regroups, basins that will hold that water before it goes into the creeks and into the groundwater. So that's the basic philosophy of how this project is working. Just a little bit of a shout out to here in Washtenaw County, we're very lucky to have several land protection programs that are funded by property taxes. With a small property tax, through the last 20 years, these programs combined have protected 21,000 acres of natural areas and farmland. So that's through county natural areas preservation, so that's the county NAP, so that's countywide. People all have a little bit of their property taxes go to protect natural areas. In the city of Ann Arbor, that purple square is the green belt, and so that people within the city have a bit of their property taxes going towards that to protect lands outside of the city. And then the darker purple, it's kind of hard to see, the darker purple townships are the ones that also have voted for their own property tax village to do land protection. And so these programs are all able to work together and kind of leverage each other's money to protect even more like through partnerships. I want to draw your attention to that lilac-y purple color, which is encompassing the watershed itself. So it's the big one that's overlaying all of them, and then there's a bit in Salem Township, and then down in Freedom Share in that whole area. The city has just decided to create also a blue belt, which is the source water protection area for their water intake at Barton Pond. And so that's all the area of the watershed above Barton Pond they recognize is important to protect because of their drinking water treatment costs and wanting to provide clean drinking water. So that's really exciting for us because of course we're a watershed-based organization. So that part in northwest Salem is Horseshoe Creek, I believe, and that flows into the river and comes down into the island from there. So the criteria and the way they're going to be doing this program exactly haven't been set yet, but I was excited to share that with you. And just to give you a little bit of a visual, these were the protected lands as the county mapped them out in 2000, and then 20 years later, that's what the 21,000 more acres looks like. So you can see it makes a big difference to have those programs. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about policy. And I gave this little talk at our last board meeting for Watershed Council. I'm going to be talking to Brighton City Planning Commission in a couple, 2-3 weeks as well about this. And so I thought I'd just sort of tell you, talk with you about it too. So the kind of policies that we're promoting with this grant, we kind of winnowed them down to sort of my top 10. So I'm going to start with number 10 first, just like David Letterman did. And so this one's a straightforward, sort of easy peasy one, right? So you want to know where those natural areas are, where there's woodlands and wetlands are. Include them in your master plan map, which Salem does, which is terrific. And so now this is my little helpful map, so all the smiley faces are showing that we've got that. You do know where your natural areas are. You have excellent master plan and some excellent mapping in there. Another policy would be having what's often called open space zoning. So you can see that you guys see site plans all the time. So you know that this is a typical site plan in Michigan, and kind of what they call cookie cutter, right? You know, there's 1 acre lot development, so you just divide it up into however many lots, divided by however many acres, or the other way around. But this site plan kind of takes the different, separates those, and looks at the overall density. So it's the same amount of lots, but you don't have to have them all on a big lot, right? And so this helps you to reduce the amount of impervious surfaces that we talked about. The homeowners get a nice amenity out of it, and the water is happy for that. So having that, and a lot of communities have this, and I believe there's a state law that requires zoning ordinances to have some sort of open space zoning. They are not even smiley faces. Yes, they are. You just can't see. The smiley faces here are specific to the communities that we have worked with, and so I have to admit I haven't looked closely at what your zoning ordinance says, but I think you've got some provisions like that, right? So overlay districts, I'm going to talk about this today specifically for Salem. An overlay district is, you probably all know what it is you have your districts like commercial, residential, and so on. An overlay district would be mapped over those land use districts. So an overlay district for water quality could be, regardless of what the category is in terms of land use, everything 100 foot from a stream or a lake or any other waterway is in this overlay protection district. And we can talk about that more later. But that's the idea there, and the one on the right is in Webster Township, and so they have an overlay district for all of their streams and the part of the river that goes through. And then in Brighton Township, which is one of the ordinances that we've shared with you, they have an overlay district for all of those green blobs, which I'll get into. Oops. And so these are communities that we have specifically worked with who have overlay districts, either for water quality or for other kinds of protections. Setbacks and buffers. It's really very similar to the overlay district, and I'm even now a little fuzzy on what's really the difference, but you know what setbacks are. You have setbacks for everything, right? You have to be set back this far from the road. That your roof your building has to be set back from the side yard and the backyard and the front yard, and very familiar topic. So we would love to see building set back away from the water so that rainfall and snow melt has time to infiltrate into ground before it goes into the stream. Same thing with wetlands and lakes. And then a buffer is just a way of saying you would also want to see a buffer where you maintain a native landscaping, shrubs, trees, deep-rooted natural plants, because that is even better at sucking up the polluted runoff and providing habitat and corridors, and really doing a great job of keeping the water from getting the pollution in it. And also keeping the stream cool, which is another very important thing that natural areas for that wetlands and trees and shrubs do. Lots of communities have setbacks, and I think your ordinance has a setback as well.
We have 50 feet for streams and 50 feet for wetlands.
Okay.
So you can give us a smiley face next
Yes,
time you update your
it's
slideshow.
not quite big enough for our taste, but
Okay.
yes.
Oh, you can give a half
You
smiley
get partial
face.
credit.
You get a wink.
So stormwater, so you want to, when the top of that pyramid is when you have development, which we do have to have development because we have to live here, you want to minimize the impacts of what you've created, that impervious surface water coming off of that has to go somewhere. So this is an example of a rain garden. Oh, yeah, so instead of the water coming off the road and just continuing to go down into a storm drain, it'll go into this nice rain garden that it has been planted with. In this case, they're daffodils, but we would probably prefer native plants that have deep roots, and their natural state is to be soaking up that stormwater. So that's an example of a stormwater BMP, best management practice. There are lots and lots of them, and you have a stormwater ordinance, and you also have developments reviewed by the Washtenaw County Water Resources Commission. So you're looking at this as well within your site plan. So everybody in Washtenaw County is looking good. I think so. I think Livingston County Drain Commissioners also, and Oakland County Water Resources Commissioner are looking into these similar rules. Okay, wetlands ordinance. You also have wetlands ordinance, which is great. And so that's extremely important because wetlands, people say they're the kidneys of the watershed. So when it hasn't rained in a while, they're still wet, and so that they can provide water to the stream. And when it's been raining, they can absorb the rainwater. They're incredibly important for habitat. Wetlands along lakes are where most of the fish spawning happens. They're incredibly important for carbon storage and sucking carbon out of the air. So they are especially important natural features to be protected. And so all of the brown municipalities have wetland ordinances. Doing site plan review to reduce impervious surface. And so having all of this in your site plan. So making sure you're asking the developer for a natural features inventory in the site plan, for an impervious surface calculation, and a calculation of the stormwater runoff, and all these kinds of things. And also having site design for low impact development. So taking a look at, how much, you don't have a lot of commercial, but you will if you go through this urban services district. Making sure that you don't have these huge parking lots that are built for they call it like the 50-year shopping event, right? You don't have to provide as much parking as you see other places providing necessarily. You can provide for shared parking. Some of the roads don't have to be as narrow, as wide as they are. I know with county roads, you don't have the power of that, but a private road ordinance can provide developers with a way to reduce impervious surface. So things like that. There's a lot of things that can be done. And like I say, we work with these specific communities on some of that. And we're going up the pyramid, so did I miss anything? So we really want to control. So I was really talking up until now about what happens to the development, wherever it is. But what's even more important is determining where the development happens in the first place. So we would like to promote development where there's already infrastructure to handle it, where you already have the roads and utilities, and it's not necessarily spread out all over the place, and people can share transportation needs and everything. So, of course, picture of a city. We don't have a city here yet, but we want to see more development in areas where it's already developed. We don't want to necessarily take all of the areas that this happens to be a fen, a very special kind of wetland that's particularly unique. Out in Lima Township, I think, is out near sort of Pinckney Rec area. And we would not like to see development in those kinds of areas where you're providing us with so many ecological benefits. So having a master plan where you have that, and in your master plan you have an area. I mean, you guys have in some ways a blank slate here in Salem because there's very little development. There's very little municipal utilities. So you kind of have your choice in a way of where you want to see this happen. You have good water quality. You have very little impervious surfaces here at the moment. So you are in the prevention. You're at the bottom of the pyramid there. So you have done a green infrastructure planning workshop with us, and there's the folks from the Land Preservation Committee. And so this is taking the natural features map that's in your master plan and kind of putting a little more intentionality into it. So you have the orange, it's hard to see, but there's orange areas, the ones with that I've named all by myself, are the larger sort of hubs of habitat. So larger areas that are have fully functioning or almost fully functioning ecosystems. And then the smaller sites where there are woodlands and wetlands that together the committee decided would could be important to protect sort of as a network. And then connecting them with waterways, tree lines, things like that. So connecting one woodland to another is incredibly important, especially in the fragmented southeast Michigan. There's not a lot left of a large contiguous ecosystem. So we have smaller patches. Even the big orange spots are pretty small, you know, in the context of all of Michigan, I'd say. So being able to connect them in corridors is extremely important for wildlife habitat, pollinators, recreation, even climate, and having climate resilience. Having those corridors is very important to protect, especially along waterways. And so these are all of the communities that have done the green infrastructure kind of workshop, and they have these kinds of maps and plans as Salem has. So the master plan, like I said, and this is your master plan, so you have definitely have an idea behind this of having development that is high quality, is attractive, provides a good sense of place for folks, where people could possibly, you know, live not too far away from where they work or where they go to school. You could have public transport. You could have bike lanes and things like that. So we just love to see that. I love to see that. And so I like how the master plan looks. And those are the places where I have decided their master plan looks like they have a place for development and a place for land protection. So I think that's great. The very last thing, drum roll, is, again, broken record, protect natural areas and guide development to compact communities, not necessarily meaning, you know, high rises, but places where people, like I like to think of it as you could walk to get a pop or a coffee. You don't necessarily have to drive everywhere. And this is just a kind of a schematic that somebody did of, the picture on the left is an aerial of just an empty landscape with some, you know, it's farmland and some woods and some houses. And then the picture in the middle is assuming you added, it's 20 years later, you know, and this is all of the development that came into this area. It's like suburban Detroit, suburban Ann Arbor. So let's say that's, you know, 5,000 more households. So this is what it looks like, though, if they say built out what the urban services did. So it still looks really nice, and you have all those natural areas, and the working lands, as some say, the farmland, is performing ecological services still to your community. So, and you might say that's what's going on over there. It must be awfully dense and uncomfortable. There are definitely ways to design it. Design is everything. So that it's, like I said, you have parkland in those areas, you have public transit. I mean, public transit, it's difficult to think about that in a rural area, but I feel like it's something that can happen. This is another way of looking at it. So in scenario A is, let's say, 20,000 homes came into a community, and if they're at 1 house per acre, which is a very typical zoning density, they're going to take up that much land, 2 watersheds worth of land. So let's say you increase the density to 4 houses per acre. It's gonna only consume half a watershed's worth. And if you got really, like, I'd say really European about it, and you had 8 houses per acre, then it's just math, right? So you're using up less land, and you have all that other land there that can perform your ecological services. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I'll take questions, and then I'm gonna talk a little bit about, all the paper that Bruce gave you, there was a memo, and we can talk about that a little bit too, if you like. But yeah, well, why don't you start with any questions you have? And I'll bring up the memo a little bit, if you had any questions about that. So, of course, any questions about what I just talked about? So, what I wrote up for y'all was based on several discussions with Bruce and with Pam and the Land Preservation Committee, and kind of, like I said, there's just 10 things that we had narrowed down what the township can work on, and there are many, many more than that. So we wanted to get a sense of, what's the priority kinds of policies we want to work on. And it came down to, like Bruce said, have some kind of natural features overlay, some way to have a setback and protect the waterways, and then looking at a woodland ordinance and a wetland ordinance. And so those are the main things I looked at. And then at our last meeting, we had talked about the issue of the battery storage idea. So that's also in the memo. It's not so much a topic of tonight's discussion, but I have that in there, and you're welcome to ask questions about that as well. But the gist of the memo is that the 2 sample ordinances that we shared with you are one from Ann Arbor Township, and that uses a straightforward, this is a setback required from all waterways and a 100-foot setback. So it's kind of written like the other kind of setback provisions of an ordinance. So it's very specific, it's simple, 100-foot setback, 25-foot vegetated buffer, and 25-foot setback from wetlands. And so I call that one of our sample ordinances that I would recommend taking a look at as something to start with. And we have, Ann Arbor Township has the same consultant as you guys, so Carla Wartman, we have Sally Elmer works on our ordinances. So that's kind of a straightforward one. But then also Brighton Township has what I showed you, that overlay ordinance, right? So they have taken the natural areas in their community, and when I say natural areas, what I specifically mean is the natural areas that the Watershed Council, that we mapped out as part of our natural areas assessment and protection program. And so some years ago, 2007, we created this map. We called it the Bio Reserve Map at the time, for you folks who might remember. And just taking aerial photos, we just delineated with the GIS computer mapping software where we saw woodlands and wetlands, and ended up with 1,700 sites, natural area sites, all over the watershed. And so we had this map, and then we prioritized them based on computer mapping information. Well, the size, we get a higher score. If it had particular kinds of vegetation on it, it got a higher score, and so on. So 16 different ones. You can go on our website and look it up. The upshot, though, is that Livingston County took that map and they did the same thing. They added the townships that were not in our watershed. And so that's what Brighton Township is using, is that very map. And so I have my GIS software up here, and I'll show you. Now I have to look at it from here. So that would be basically, if we were to do it in Salem Township, that would be.
This is Salem Township that we're seeing here?
Yeah, and so those are the natural areas as mapped by the Watershed Council. And then you can see that I made the streams big because I'm including the 100-foot buffer. And so that's kind of what Brighton Township does. I know that the township is also very interested in groundwater recharge and groundwater vulnerability, right? So everybody's on a well, so something that you can also consider, what did I do?
It's a good question.
We could also provide, we have since doing this, the other exciting thing is we are updating that natural areas map, and so we'll have an update of that very map with using updated aerial photos and updated criteria, so it'll be better soon. This would be using more up-to-date land cover information that we got from the USGS, so you can see it adds a few wetlands especially, a few woodlands down there. Now if you want to also add groundwater related information, so I just added number 4. I'm sorry, I can't see very well. Oh, here it is. Okay, so this is the Watershed Council's groundwater recharge layer that we got from University of Michigan. And so that does a GIS model of looking at soil that's permeable, glacial geology that's like sand and gravel, so it holds more groundwater, and then topography. So areas of higher topography, you would theorize then have more of that sand and gravel, so you can store more groundwater, so groundwater recharge area. So if I take these off, you'll get a better picture of it. So these are these areas. I don't know if that seems like, so this is the golf club, 6 Mile, I guess. So I don't know if that makes sense or not in terms of feeling like those are sort of higher areas. It's kind of a rolling hills sort of thing. And I made paper copies of some of these, like obviously not dynamic like this. So that's number 5, and then you could also add the map of just highly permeable soils. Are those red areas? So you can expect groundwater to move quicker into the soil in those areas. And then number 7 is the glacial geology, which is more sand and gravel or coarse texture, and that's big. That's big because it's a state scale, right? So it's, if you went to that specific area, you're not going to. I wouldn't necessarily take those boundaries, totally on face. You know what I mean? Like it's a general. It's not a township scale map, for sure. But I thought it was interesting to see that, because that's where the model of the first layer came from. Then, what we did at some point is we worked with a hydrogeologist from U of M Flint, back in the 90s, and created this groundwater vulnerability layer, which combines those 3. And it's the red areas again. So they're all kind of lining up, right? These 2 sort of main areas here. Is that 8? Yes. So you have seen this map, and you can't see it very well because of the lighting. I wonder if we could turn this. But the Washtenaw County, what they call groundwater recharge map, I've never been able to find. I've never been able to find where like the data sources and everything for that and how they did the methodology, but you can, this is one of the areas. This is another one of the areas. So it kind of, I think what they're getting at is groundwater vulnerable. So areas that are permeable, close, and the water table is close. So you don't have to dig far to get to the water table. It means it's more vulnerable, right? Whereas groundwater recharge area, it's far from the water table, but it has that groundwater storage, so they're both important. So I just wanted to show you these for if you're interested in thinking more about the overlay zoning for the natural areas, there are different ways you can map that out. And if you want to include some of the groundwater components along with natural areas, we can work with you on creating some of these. We can work with Carl and Warman on the mapping. So that's all available to you. Or you can just do the simpler Ann Arbor Township setbacks from these mappings. So you have a whole, you have a lot of choices.
So Chris, in those areas, so based on the different criteria, whatever we use to get to a district or an
Yep.
overlay district, then the suggestion would be within those districts, you would have more stringent requirements for development?
Yeah.
Or you would prohibit development?
Well-
Or in this memo, you mentioned that they require a permit. So what,
Yeah.
then that permit
Yes, so
then?
you apply for a permit, and so in Ann Arbor Township's case, they apply for a permit, for a natural features permit.
Which does what then?
And they, and they only have to apply for a permit if they are building within that setback. So
And
if
what-
they're not building within the setback, they don't,
What does the permit do?
it would allow for it would allow for building within a setback if the developer needs to,
So you pay to break the rule.
well, that's how permits work, right?
Well,
But there's mitigation
Well, I mean,
involved.
I guess my question is, does the permit have a more stringent development requirement?
That's the argument for having a setback requirement versus an overlay. But when I looked through the Brighton Township ordinance, I saw that, I admit I didn't look closely at the setback part, but the woodland part, because I know you're interested in a woodland ordinance. The woodland ordinance does, it says prohibited, right? Development within the woodlands of the natural features, any of the natural features, including woodlands. But if you end up having to do it because there's no feasible alternative, then you have to provide mitigation. And the way it's written in Brighton Township is twice as much as that you're building in. And so it's not very specific. So it seems to me like the setback ordinance, just as a setback ordinance, it's more clear in terms of what you can require and how the permitting works. But the overlay idea is in some ways allows you more, well, first of all, it's more holistic, so, because you're talking about all the natural features at once. So you don't have to have a separate woodland ordinance and setback on natural features ordinance and things like that. So in some ways, it's more holistic, and so I feel like if you could take both of them and get the parts of the setback ordinance that are giving you that strictness and make sure that they're in the overlay ordinance. And the other thing I was going to do that I didn't get a chance to is actually talk to the Brighton Township folks and see how some of their site plans have gone in terms of developing these areas.
So I guess I'm wondering, so if you have the overlay district and you require a permit, then the permit may be more stringent than your typical development requirements outside of the overlay district. That would make sense to me.
Yes.
So you would require like a less building footprint, less impervious surface in that district, maybe even greater setbacks in that district.
It's basically just saying you cannot develop within those areas. And so it doesn't have like an impervious limit, so for instance. So I guess the more stringent requirement really is just the piece, keeping the development out of those natural features.
So it would prohibit development within it.
Right, and but if the developer can show that there's no proven alternative, then you need to allow them, as I understand, like there's more pressure on the township than to allow something because they need to be able to build something is the argument, right? And so then you can negotiate around, well, okay, you can encroach into the woodland this much, but then you've got to plant trees somewhere else. But it's still important to have that wetland ordinance separate.
The setbacks, like you said, Brighton and Ann Arbor, the setbacks from the waterways for building, you said 100 feet?
Yes.
That's creeks? Creeks, streams, whatever.
Creeks
Water.
and streams, lakes, but not wetlands. Wetlands is, now you have 50 feet, you said, from wetlands? So that's great. Have you had any issues with that?
There is a provision that a developer could ask for a half of that setback if they can determine that they're gonna provide greater buffering within that
Okay.
area.
Yeah, okay. So, so most of what I've seen over all of Southeast Michigan has been a 25-foot setback for wetlands. So that's great, you have a 50-foot one.
You get a smiley face.
Yes.
Bruce.
So, and I'm kind of half addressing Bart's question as well, but, you know, typical developer doesn't look at any of the natural stuff per se, other than the big stream that they can't do anything with. And wants to do the simple, you know, architect, clean whatever, build as designed and not worry about any of this stuff. So what we're asking you to do in this natural overlay district is to incorporate and work around as much of this stuff as possible. And if you can't, back to the point, if you can't, if there's some, you know, reason why we can't, then we want to push the development to use extreme things such as more pervious, like pervious parking instead of impervious parking, or other things to offset some of the things that we're trying to avoid in the first place.
Are you addressing this in a sense of when you say developer, you're talking a person coming in wanting to put in a neighborhood, put in new streets, everybody has matching mailboxes, or are you talking an individual landowner that wants to come in and put a single family?
It could be a house, a single family house, or it could be someone wants to put in a building on a commercial property, or a development of multiple buildings or multiple homes. So anywhere, even, and we've done a pretty good job. You saw that like right angular through the township. A lot of those homes that went in there, went into some of those valleys and strips, they did a pretty good job of not just bulldozing all the trees out and putting in a development. They actually respected those natural features and worked around them. Could they have done even more stuff? Yes, but they at least, everybody embraced it and said, this is what, you know, this is, you know, why we want to be here is because of all this natural stuff around me, and they took care of doing things the right way. But you know, we're experiencing now where we're getting some pressure from people that say, hey, I own this property, I want to do what I want to do on this property because it's mine and I should be able to do anything I want to, including damaging your well water.
So if I can jump in real quick, Bert, what our ordinance currently says is that if you are doing a development that requires a site plan, then you are required to adhere to a certain list of standards.
Yeah.
And so some of these things, like the 50-foot setback, 50-foot wetland setback, apply to those. Individual home developers don't have to go through that site plan process, but there is something in the ordinance that says we discourage clear cutting of a site and that you should only be clearing the space for your home building site. There's really no teeth to that, though.
So is that in the, like, if it's a homeowner on an individual lot, they come in and it's the zoning official then that kind of reviews that, not the planning commission?
Right.
And so that's where they have that.
So that's where, like, I would encourage them to not, but I don't really have it, there's no teeth behind that. I can't tell you, no, you can't clear this entire place, but I would encourage somebody to say, zoning ordinance encourages you to only clear the space needed for your building sites, for your lawn area.
Help me with something really small. What's the difference between building a house 50 feet from the stream and 100 feet from the stream?
So there is additional surface area that allows the water to run through typically vegetation that helps that water go into the ground, which the ground filters the water, as opposed to running directly into the stream where the pollutants are carried.
We're talking water coming off the roof?
Or,
Driveway.
yeah,
Or just off over the lawn,
yeah.
wherever.
Some of the questions.
Okay, so that's just where the water comes out. That has nothing to do with necessarily where the house is.
So the 50, so that gets back then to what Chris was talking about, the difference between a setback and a buffer. So with a buffer, you would be required to have certain types of plants or vegetation in that area that would help slow that rainwater down. So I don't know the gentleman sitting next to Bruce.
Seth.
Hi, Seth.
Hi.
But water running off the roof, running off your driveway, and then running through the lawn, and oftentimes people put chemicals on the lawn, so you want all that stuff to filter out before it gets into the street. So that's an intent for having that setback there. Even better to have a buffer.
So some of the things that came to my mind about this, being very, I get it, I understand it, but then as a community and being citizens of the community, things that come to my mind is our current state government is kind of stripping some of the local control that we once had to try, whether it's the gravel companies or the battery or the solar, you know, their government is stripping us of control of us trying to protect our community. And I'm not looking for an answer on that. And another thing that comes to my mind is the balance of this with property rights and people's property rights. You know, it's got to be a delicate balance. Another thing that comes to my mind, I'm a note taker, is when we look at some of these numbers, is reasonableness versus excessiveness. And where does that number come from and who determines that? I think that's all something we need to, you know, in the protections. And when you talk about wetlands, not everything is, wetlands have different levels of quality from what I understand. So I think that's important too. I mean, wetlands, from what I understand, so I guess I would probably like more education on that, and it's probably not like a big long report or anything. It's probably like a 60-second, this is it. But, you know, different wetlands come and go. You know, did they start, were they man-made? Is it filled with phragmites? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's a natural wetland still.
Right. Oh, and that was it. Last one was mine. Just noting and updating and mass. But I think those are all things that we need to look at and understand in balancing these things and creating and having input from our community. So that's my 2 cents. Yeah. Well, I thought we would talk to our questions first,
Oh, okay.
and then we would go to them. So, did you have questions? I'm sorry, what?
Why is Bruce treated differently than the rest of us? He is no more on the planning commission than I am.
Because
and you call
he's
on
part of
Bruce, and you last meeting you ignored Bonnie. You did the same thing. Tonight, I would like to speak, but I'm told I have to wait. Bruce can interject. Why is that?
Because Bruce is on the preservation, and
But
he's
this is a
helping
planning commission.
educate us of the work that he has already done in working with Chris and David. So I'm trying to get the most information out as we can in the first part, and then go to the questions of what was missing. So that was my choice.
I got it.
Okay.
I understood, Pam. Got it. Not the word.
But now these guys, does anybody have anything? Okay. Linda, Bonnie?
What's been done tonight is absolutely wrong. As one of the larger landowners in this township, to have somebody come in here and tell us that we can't develop our land like everybody else because we need 100-foot buffers and we need this and we need that. That's a taking by the government. Can't have different standards for different people. This township has other ways to preserve land. Put your land in the green belt. The only problem there is that the township has an assessor that jacks your values back up to above what they were worth before you did that. What's being proposed here tonight is nothing more than a taking. And you're coming in and you're saying to somebody that foolishly has not developed their land in the last 200 years, that they've held on to maybe a 50 or 80 or 100 acre piece. And guess what, guys? You now have to have much more stringent standards than anybody else. You can't have a 50-foot setback, you gotta have a 100-foot setback. And that's wrong. Not opposed to mitigation methods. You have that now. You have in your ordinance where if you cut trees of a certain diameter, it has to be mitigated. You have to plant trees. But what's being proposed here is wrong. Dead wrong. And it is, you cannot preserve land on the back of private individuals. When you buy land, you have a certain economic expectation for that land. Showstack has an economic expectation in the urban services district. They bought land anticipating that they could have a much denser development because they're gonna be on public water and sewer. This township, almost 30 years ago, decided they would stay rural, and their proposal at the time was, if you owned large acreage, you could have 40-acre minimums. Well, that's reaching into that landowner's pocket and stripping their equity out of the land, and that's what's being proposed tonight. And I hope that the Planning Commission, and Pam, I heard you say a little bit of that you're gonna take that into consideration. And understand, I'm somebody who's already protected my land. There will never be another home built on my farm, because I've already protected it. But I find that have it forced down your throat is appalling versus to educate people where they can voluntarily make that decision. And I would encourage the Planning Commission that whatever you do, give your private property owners the right to voluntarily preserve their land, not to have it forced down their throat. Thank you, Pam.
Bonnie?
I want to respond to that. I understand exactly what Linda's talking about. That's why I had these questions up there. But where I would disagree is to say that I think one of the most important things that we can do in our role here, and I know sometimes it irks people because we have these long meetings, but we have nice food and all that, so I'm just teasing, is to educate ourselves. I think one of the worst things we can do and the biggest disservice we can do to our community is come in with an agenda that we read maybe 3-4 days ago and just, I think a lot of things we do in planning, the Planning Commission's responsibility is to plan, and that part, a huge part of it is education. Education of ourselves, education of the community, and also have the input and feedback of the community, which is one of the things that I said in there is public input. So I don't see this as being shoved down our throats. I don't see us as taking any action on this today. This is just part of an education program of what we have done multiple times, like the battery storage thing. We need to be informed, and some of that stuff just doesn't come overnight and then take a vote on it. So I know sometimes people here say, Pam, you're making a last show. You know what? I think we need to really think about these things, because the key word in what we're supposed to do is plan. We have experts, we have a committee within our own township that has a focus on preservation. We have all different factions, but hearing people and hearing people out doesn't mean we're just gonna roll over for anybody. Not saying that Chris is trying to roll over us by any means. I think this is just part of an education thing, and we need to think about this, and it's a big deal, and it's not gonna happen overnight. Bruce?
To Linda's point, there's a few of those items that were offsets to that, so if there's areas of the property that are maybe more natural, we wanna preserve, we need to look at, as Chris mentioned, higher density. Unfortunately, as it relates to the residential side, because of the well water, and septic field, we're stuck with a 1 acre minimum, but we can take a 2 acre down to a 1 acre if we need to site, so that you can still get the same density, but yet you protect it, or you avoided not protected per se, but avoided developing the natural features that we want to worry about as it relates to our water recharge. The older wood species, again, we're not talking about brush areas can't be developed because it's brush. That's one of the things that we're trying to work towards here, is having a good woodland thing that again, what I started with is there's one community that tried to fight a development because there was poor quality wood, but woods throughout the property, and another development that tried to basically clear cut some very good wood and old growth and whatnot, and was able to defend it because the species and the size trees were well planned out in their ordinance, so that there was a clear, defendable area within their ordinance versus one that was trying to protect property from development by saying, well, there's all this brush on the property, you can't develop it there. And it's just scrub trees.
Well, I still think one of the biggest issues here, and I think that, I've heard a lot of this stuff before. I've heard it, I've worked with Chris in the past and whatnot, but I'm quite sure that Bob hasn't, and Kevin hasn't, and Mike hasn't. You other guys have, I'm pretty sure, and they've been here before, so. But so this is part of the education, but I think it's gonna be it's a sticky balance, because we can't protect every tree, and we can't even, some of us can't even protect our own children, right? Or our neighbors, or our friends with what's going on out in the world. So we do have to be careful in balancing, like, as a small business owner, pennies count, and nothing, when you've been in those shoes, whether you're a property owner or a business owner trying to make it, then the government coming in, whether it's the small government or the state government or the federal government, telling us what we have to do, right? That's it. And our community is not big on that. However, I still think it's important for us to listen to all different sides so we can be educated and make a good decision.
Data is data.
Data is data.
Pam, if I may add something too, you do have a policy document in your master plan where you have asked the public questions like this, and it is told time and time again that open space preservation, natural features preservation, and water quality is important, so.
Right.
So
They come
understanding.
and tell us all the time.
Yeah, so based on that policy direction, you asked the question before, whose decision is it? It's yours, the township's decision, and you're acting on behalf of your residents. And so understanding, like you say, doing this education to find out what the best practices are, and then finding that balance of where that works right. You're exactly right.
No one's gonna respond that watershed protection is unimportant. There's 0 people in this township that are gonna respond, no, watershed protection is not important. What they need to understand is the balance between, if you give this, what does it take? So what you're saying to Pam is absolutely spot on. Yep. But no one's gonna respond.
It's time for an
Because you're all on
assessment.
low water.
It's time for a reassessment, and it's an important time with the changes that our community is on the cusp of. So is anything gonna change? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. But what are we gonna change? Where do we start? What does, I didn't quite have, I didn't realize how difficult between a buffer and the setback, So we always learn things, and it's important to listen and to hear. That doesn't mean we're gonna turn Salem Township on its ear tonight.
Well, and I think that you already have a lot of
We do have a
good
lot of good
protections in
stuff.
place, and so Chris offered a top 10 list and then some higher priority things. So I think the next step would be for you all to take those and think about them and decide, are there areas where we want to
What we
explore?
like, what we don't like.
Yeah.
I love maps. I think that when you have a map of your community, in order to make a decision, what are you dealing with? Where is it? Like when they came in with those windmills, we had Sarah come in, I can't remember her last name, but she says, you're in an area that you really don't have, you're not really vulnerable to these big windmills. That's good stuff to know. So there's a lot of things we could take from this, but I would like to know when we start getting into discussing this is, the government aspect of it, and what's historical behind some of that without getting too far into the weeds, right? But like the solar, and we talked about the solar, we talked about
Yeah.
the wind, and we talked about the battery.
I'd be happy to look into that more, and I think I'll be getting into that more after my retirement too, as a citizen.
If you can't retire. But just, kind of. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions, anything, what you liked, what you don't like?
Please ask that question.
Those are the only ones who
No?
don't.
Okay.
I said, is there anything here that, we've had a pretty thorough, with all kinds of options, it was never presented as, this is what you need to do, but somebody who's been in the business for 32 years, has a lot of experience with communities such as ours, and we've got a great community. It's kind of funny, we've got all the tree huggers in Ann Arbor, and Ann Arbor has so much concrete and chemicals.
Well, Chris, we'll have a real problem with groundwater when the battery storage, the batteries go on fire or they start leaking, and we'll really have some groundwater problems, huh?
I've looked into it, and as far as I can tell, it's not a, doesn't seem to be a high-risk land use on my first look. I'm not a toxicologist, but.
Well, we have the landfill right here, right? So we're used to big toxic things or little toxic things, but it kind of.
It was interesting, just after I talked to Pam about that issue, that I went to a presentation by the Washtenaw County Pollution Prevention Program, which they're gearing up, I guess, they've been around for 20 years, and they're gearing up to be revitalized, and they're very interested in talking with all the local governments in the county about how they can make sure that they understand what's going on in each community and where all your areas are, and they're very savvy on, what is it that can cause groundwater contamination, and they have a lot of information about best practices businesses can follow, like for instance, gas stations having secondary containment around tanks and things like that.
Well, the landfill has liners, so
Yep.
the batteries are stored
Oh, and
in
then
sea
the
containers.
landfill is a state regulated,
Correct.
right, land use,
Well, and every county is required to have, right, a land refuse or a trash plan or policy, right? Isn't that something?
Not like
No?
that.
I mean, they're not to have that, they need to have some sort of trash plan.
Yes.
The occurrence or the risk of occurrence of something like that may be low, but I think battery technology and anything like that is such an infant subject. I don't think there's enough data to make that claim or assess that. What's beyond that, the risk, is the severity of an occurrence. The automotive industry, we do a design failure mode effects analysis, DFEMA, we do them all day long. We get what's called an RPN, risk something number, risk potential number, or something like that. I can't even remember. And you're basically multiplying those two. So yeah, although the occurrence may be, or the risk of it happening, severity is very high. So I do encourage you to look at those. I think that'd be
If
a
you
fun
have any
little
information to
project.
send me, I'd be happy to,
Then
I
you
want
sit
to
there
learn
and talk
myself
about the state
because.
government that can sit there and come in and say, oh, by the way, I don't care what your ordinance says, this is going to be now a battery storage facility.
And not allow us to require any kind of protections like decommissioning or something like that. There's so much
And
unknown.
then I'd be very interested in where something like this would go if someone came in, a farmer wanted to expand, and they bought land that, bought 80 acres, 80% of it was wooded,
Yeah.
and they said, great, guess what, I'm gonna come in and clear cut, make 2x4s and sell that, and that's gonna help take care of some of my investment, and then I'm gonna chip up stumps, and I'm gonna sell wood chips, and then I'm gonna farm the living bejeepers out of the land. And something came in there and got in the way of, oh, no, you can't do that. That'd be a tough sell.
To get around the
and
right to
understand.
farm act.
And Salem is popular with a cross-section of people because it is open, because people aren't forced to live, I sneeze and my neighbor says, bless you. We're not,
Yeah.
that's not here. Now, of course, we've set aside
Yeah.
areas that can be done, and that's being taken advantage of, and not in a bad way. It's,
Yeah,
yes, it's like, oh yes, I understand, that's where I'll do it. I mean that in a good way.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there's the balance that Paul talked about. So this is an interesting experiment.
Well, that's the great thing that I see here is that you're inviting people in, like our group and Sarah Mills from Michigan's U of M and people like that can give you, it's more data, like you
Yep,
said,
data
more
is
data
data.
is
Yep.
good, so.
In the most of our property is zoned residential ag.
Potential, just potential.
Yeah, there's potential mini farms all over the place.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking
That's why people like to be here is because of our farmers. So one of the things we, another reassessment is of our farm policies that we discussed and Paul is looking into to
Great.
protect your farmers, protect
Yes.
that area.
Yeah.
Allow them to do what they need to do.
Right, right.
And we're not gonna have we're not gonna be able to plan this community out to a T, stuff's gonna happen. So,
Sure.
but- Well, anybody else have any questions? Anybody else wanna contribute anything? Well, thank you guys for coming, we
Yeah,
appreciate
sure.
it. All interesting stuff, new stuff, and things are always changing, and it's kinda nice to know that Salem's quite in there, a lot of haves in there.
Yeah.
And we'll have to take it all in and like I said, see what we like and don't like and let our neighbors, I mean, we're not just the planning commission, we are part of the community, but we like to get the input from, see what you guys like.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's the only way to do it.
Yeah, but all kinds of neat things. I think maps are amazing, provides, so we know why we're making the decisions that we have, that we are.
Well, yeah, let us know if you're ready to move forward on anything. I mean, you know how to get
Sure.
sample ordinance language and everything, but.
So you said you did have some resources available to do kind of like ordinance audit type work, or?
Yeah, yeah, we have worksheets that we fill out, that we use so everybody gets the same, consistent, because your master plan was when?
It was 19, so we're starting to look at it again now.
Okay, so there's that process, and we do audits, I guess you'd say.
Okay. So I think we'll probably talk internally and figure out which things rise to
Yeah,
the
we want
top.
to move forward on first.
Yep.
Hey, good luck with your retirement.
Yeah, congrats.
We'll see you again, you're not with us yet.
Okay, let's see. Thank you, guys. Thank you all for coming. Old business items. Battery energy storage discussion. Why is that on there? I don't think we have anything to discuss, though. We don't have any new info or anything like that.
There's no new info, but we did put together a draft of it's kind of nice with the lights off. We did put together a draft. You may want to take some time to digest it, but essentially this would have been a draft ordinance for requirements for battery energy storage that was below that threshold that would fall under the state-regulated,
Fall under or fall outside?
fall under. So less than the nameplate capacity that falls into the state's jurisdiction.
So it would be in ours.
It would be in yours,
Okay,
yes.
right. You know the person that made this, you know the responsibility for that? It's crazy.
Maybe that's why I'm lost here. I don't seem to have that. I didn't see that.
Pam, in your packet, you have a big,
Yep.
on the back of it, just all your other papers.
On the what?
You should have the back of your other.
I got my packets spread all over the place. And I looked at the email, because that's where,
Please.
yeah, nope, I got it. Okay. I'm sorry. I made a snafu. All right.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
So essentially, we just this is some kind of sample language that we've been working on that we're in the office since all of this legislation has come down. And this would be, as I said, for something that was under the threshold that the state would regulate, but could be regulated by the township. So we've got some kind of standard setback language, standard buffering language as far as vegetation and screening, that kind of thing. A lot of what I put in here, so we kind of had a standard that some of the folks in my office were working on, but I modeled this a lot on what we did with the solar and the wind.
Okay.
So using similar standards for noise, light, buffering requirements. The lot coverage is a little bit higher here than what we had done for solar, because solar tended to be less impervious than what we think might be happening with the battery facilities. So we expect the battery facilities to be on a smaller footprint and a lot more dense, so they can kind of stack these cells next to each other. So we suggested a 50% lot coverage, so there would be 50% impervious area there. Maximum height, we did 30 feet, which I don't think that any of these facilities are planned to be that high, and maybe we want to look at something lower. So there are a few things that I want your reaction to. As we discussed last month, typically what they're proposing, or what they're using is what amounts to kind of the size of one of those shipping containers, right?
But they're not stacking.
No, not yet. Well, that's right. So that's something to consider. I think, based on what I understand from the fire prevention, they wouldn't stack them. They don't even want to put them right next to each other, so that if one of them does catch fire, they
You can
can
spread it all over.
Yeah, they can contain it.
So in some of these numbers,
Your choice of words, Paul.
Well, I think
It's in a container.
Right.
Last time, he said they would just let it go.
They let
Yeah, they just-
they let it burn, and then they remove it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Steel melts at.
so that's kind of what I was, when I look at these numbers, what is the right number? We've got 50 feet from a property line. If something like that is burning and now you've got fire trucks that are coming in to let it burn or whatever, I don't really know what would happen. I'm seeing, like, when we look at these numbers,
So the 50 feet from a property line, I think, is more of a use requirement, a static requirement, than a fire protection requirement. Like the fire protection requirement between buildings in the fire code is 10 feet. So I don't know if they would place those cells that close to each other, but essentially they don't open them up. They keep them in place, and they make sure that it doesn't get hot enough to spread.
so.
This is my layman's description of it, okay? And the other piece that we've included in here are those fire codes, and that's coming from the state ordinance that they're expecting folks to adhere to. You got a question?
So Paul, would we want those sea containers on a hard surface that would contain any leakage, or do we want them on a porous gravel where things can leach into the ground?
So I think you could put them on a secondary containment,
Was
right?
there-
Like
was
you
there
would with an
secondary
above-ground
containment?
storage tank. Secondary containment, like you would with a above-ground storage tank for like gas or something like that.
Yes.
they
Yeah.
do that? Or we could ask.
We
for
could
it.
ask for that.
Yes, I can definitely.
Because that's what Chris was talking about with the pollution council.
Right. And then we have similar decommissioning plan with the escrow and the insurance and the financial guarantees that we created for the solar, which I think what we had done 2-3 years ago whenever we did that was more stringent than what the sample language that I was looking at was. So I put what we had done from the solar ordinance into this.
How does that conflict with the numbers when we talked about this last time? What was it, like 2,500, no, 250,000? Remember?
Oh, the storage? Oh, yeah.
You talking about the donation from the developers to the local municipalities?
Yeah.
That's part of the state act. That's not something,
That's a state act.
that's not something we built into here.
Okay.
Excuse me. And perhaps the largest question then is at the very beginning of this document, where we talk about where it would be located. And so whether that would be in a particular zoning district or in an overlay zoning district. Art's got questions. Do you want to jump in?
No, finish. I'll just
Okay,
So I see the benefit.
we had talked about perhaps regulating it to just the industrial district. As we have heard from the developers, they really want to be close to these trunk lines, so maybe we do an overlay district that's within a certain amount of feet from the major power corridors. So that's certainly a question for you. There is a section on fire response here, and the required training for our local safety providers.
An EV car battery can get close to 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Fire,
Okay.
steel melts at 25.
I was just gonna say, we melt the steel.
Steel melts at what?
At 25, both degrees Fahrenheit. Just so, double C tainer, triple C tainer, it's batteries that run away. You step back and you let it go and you come back.
It sounds like any kind of secondary containment would be almost useless then.
Well, I don't know what temperature concrete melts at. That's really what you're talking about for something like this. So,
I think this is a good thing to have, to kind of give us a draft to review and then create all kinds of more questions about a bunch of stuff we just don't know yet.
Yep.
These are great
Not
because
us,
it just
not
lists it
anybody.
out there. You can just go through it and see the
But-
different aspects of thought.
I did ask him to do this to get
Yeah,
started
no,
because
this is great.
it's coming in November, right?
Yeah.
And so I think no, we don't do anything.
I can't
right,
remember, Paul,
so-
was there fire suppression in those, there is not in those sea containers?
I don't believe so. So, I mean, maybe something that you want us to do is try to find an expert who can come in and give some details about the technology itself, because I don't know the answers to those questions.
What, do we have something in our ordinance that says like, I seem to remember a talk, like maybe it was 15 years ago, about like a tattoo shop or something wanted to come in, or this, that, and the other, or we don't allow certain businesses, of a certain, sales of certain products, right, allowed in the township.
Like our marijuana one.
Oh, like the marijuana one, because why?
Because they could buy it in Ann Arbor, so we didn't allow it here.
Okay. So what is the benefit of a battery storage facility to a Salem Township resident? What would be a measurable benefit to a Salem Township resident to having a battery storage facility other than tax dollars?
I mean, we have gas wells just up the road here too, which, I mean, so it's part of the energy infrastructure.
I understand. Natural gas burns at what temperature? Natural gas.
That's a different question
creates
than what you just
carbon
asked me.
dioxide and water. No. You brought it up. I'll say.
I'm just saying it's part of the energy infrastructure.
Right, okay, but what does a battery facility, okay, then maybe it's the same answer as what the gas facility.
They answered that question, Bart, when they were
Yeah.
here.
What is it?
None. And
Okay.
so we asked,
All right,
because I asked, I mean, directly, it does not benefit us.
Okay.
So it was a contribution to the grid, which is what it was.
No, we
That-
determined that it wasn't a contribution to the grid because it doesn't create its own energy. It just defers the energy to usage at a later
Right,
time.
but it
The
was
ebb and
going
flow
back
is
to the-
100% over a 24-hour period,
Right.
right? So,
Let's not get too far in the weeds.
no, this is staying right there at the 50-foot
So the way,
transitions from
100
weeds.
when they were here, they said this will, we had this whole discussion, buy low, sell when it's needed kind of thing. They need to be where they need to be. And we did ask Sarah to put it, because they were quoting all these numbers that really, I don't think they meant anything to any of us because we didn't understand. And so when we said, if the power was, just to give us an example, if the power to go out in Salem, how long would this battery storage unit
Yeah.
help us? And they said 4 hours,
Mhm.
just to kind of give us a perspective of what we're dealing with
And by the way, it doesn't provide any power to Salem. It goes
somewhere else, wherever
hundreds of
it's
miles away
needed.
from here, or wherever it was. Okay,
Right.
so
But what Paul is, he's correct, he said it's part of
Okay, so let me just play devil's advocate here, because that's
Of
what I
course,
do.
that's what you do.
That's what I do. Here's someone that says, I wanna put in a battery facility because I wanna make the money shaving the pennies at night and giving them back during the day. And the convenient spot is here, and I'm gonna make it so big that it's government regulated, and I'll have the state government sit there and fight this for it and do it. Okay, great, so that's kind of what we're looking at. Play out the situation where someone says,
Are you sure?
well,
Because
government says
what
if it's
they're
above
putting in
this,
is,
they're
it's almost
based-
kind of like battery storage acne. You know, it's here, it's here, it's here,
Yeah.
and it only needs to be on 5 acres, is from my understanding, is kind of the basic, is
Okay.
that correct?
If
Sounds
if
like
the size of the facility is directly proportional to the profit that you make, why would you not make the facility bigger and add more and do more and do more, especially if you have rules and regulations allowing you to do it? If there's nothing putting a cork on
What's
being
the
able to-
question with that?
Well, no, where I'm going with this is like.
Because remember, there are no rules, right?
Oh, I know.
Okay, so what difference does it make if they wanna put it on 5 acres or they wanna put it on 500 acres? Linda's gonna be a rich woman.
Not my problem.
Sure it is.
She's in land bank, she can't do it.
She can't build, it's greenbelt.
No,
Can't put
that's
any more
right.
facilities up there. She likes,
Bonnie's got 5 acres.
she likes
over
cows
there.
walking around.
If I had 5 acres, I'd have it in the land bank too, so. just so you-
But you
guys
see,
know
what-
that's-
so I don't understand where you're going with this
I'm not sure
question.
where I'm going either, but I just find it interesting that we can sit here and say,
See, it's how you call my name.
No,
Can
we-
I ask
let's
him
know.
where we're
I
going?
think what we talked about last time is
We're going around in
in November, when they come out with
oh,
their
yeah.
guidelines, can we go above their guidelines? Would it still be, or you just have to go with their
Yeah,
guidelines?
well, that's
So
just kinda like, yeah, but say, all right, say you're a builder, right, there's something, and here's the guidelines, and the community says, no, ours are, the state says, no, you don't have any, and the community says, oh, yes, you do, you got these, what are you gonna do? You're gonna do the bare minimum, because that's what they do. So that, we're in that same situation. There are very minimal rules, right? They're stripping zoning doesn't matter, decommissioning doesn't matter, they say even screening doesn't matter, right? They've got all this stuff.
They
So
do have decommissioning rules, they do have.
Basic.
Yeah,
basic
there are a certain, set of rules there, they're just,
Okay.
it's silent on, whether you can do it based on zoning, it's silent whether you can put in screening, those kind of things, so.
Okay. There are a lot of unknowns, I guess, is what we're seeing. So before we get into all the details, I think we need to start with a high level of what is coming quickly in November. We know they are gonna do the bare minimum. Are there some things that we can put together which is maybe reasonable and fair and consistent and just present as part of a negotiation tactic and see, they can always just say, nope, sorry, and then we are, but I mean,
What's our latitude of movement for facilities that require property less than what the state government gets involved in?
Say that again?
What is our freedom of movement? How far could our imagination take us?
That's what we're working
From
on
one
right now.
extreme. Right, but this says this is one. Can we go to the extreme of, we just don't allow it unless it's above that size?
that does not, haven't we been down this road, doesn't that start fights?
Right.
Yeah, so I think so with the marijuana example, the legislation that was passed specifically gave local municipalities the option to opt out, right? So those are all of the powers that we have as townships, as local municipalities, are granted through state legislation.
To be allowed to follow federal law?
Right.
Perfect. That's really
So,
That's a crap example in my opinion.
well,
That's because that's just so
Okay.
convoluted.
Yeah, but it works for us.
so for the
Yeah.
On that.
battery energy
Wow.
storage that is less than the threshold, that's why we put this ordinance together, a reasonable
Yeah, yeah.
ordinance.
No, I mean, I guess, I'll certainly be asking the questions, Paul, you know it. You see it coming a miles away. We've worked together for 100 years.
Yeah.
I'd be very interested in what our thoughts would be is if we just said,
Is that right,
yeah,
prohibited?
if it's, however many 50 acres up or how many megawatt hours, whatever it was, 25,000 megawatt hours.
Yeah.
So then you will only get those facilities in the township that are regulated by the state.
Right.
I think that one of the
And then we're
Scenarios-
concentrating on how would we work with those and,
well, we'd either
Yeah.
create a local compatible ordinance that's
Mhm.
basically the same as the state regulations, we just administer it locally within the certain timeframes and within those bounds. Or we allow the state to do it. One of the scenarios that we discussed at the last meeting was if we have a local ordinance that is not a compatible ordinance, but it's for something that's smaller than the threshold and has our greater setbacks and our standards in it, there's the opportunity that some developers may say, yeah, I wanna go with that because I know that it's gonna be easier to get through this process than it would be to go through Laura or whoever's gonna administer this at the state level.
what's the percentage of coverage, is it known for what the government's proposing? Is there a coverage of a piece of property? You got 10 acres, are they allowed to cover 9.9?
I'll have to look. I don't know that.
You actually don't know this right off the top of your
I
head?
don't know.
You always know it right off the top of your head, Paul.
This is new stuff, man.
Oh my gosh, well, all right.
We don't want to
No,
spend
no.
a ton of time on too much of the unknown that might not ever happen, but I think it's a good, I thought it was a good exercise
Oh, we can talk about this for hours, I think.
Oh.
for hours, right, and we're not going to.
No,
So,
good, thank you.
all good questions, got everybody thinking? Okay. So Paul, back to your, thing, I thought this was good. The number 4, the height shall not exceed 30, which was kind of high and excessive. I think it should be more reasonable about what we're looking for.
Yep.
And I think all of it should be what,
So I don't think you all have to make these decisions tonight necessarily.
No, this is just getting
No,
language, this is just getting
this is just
thought
another
uses from
training
this. This is
exercise.
great. Yep.
Paul, the standard sea container is what, 8 foot tall?
High boys 9.
No.
Oh, there's lighting and safety and security stuff and all that stuff that will be in there, sure. Okay,
I forgot.
anybody have any more contribution to that? No, you're good, okay. Reports of commissioners and correspondence, Board of Trustees in Austin, CBA,
Nothing.
land preservation, anything? Okay, good luck. Planning consultant review,
So there are no biggies coming down the pike that we have been made aware of at this point, so. Standard building permits and tech permits, that kind of thing are happening, but.
any issues we're having in our township in regards to ordinance types of violations or issues concerning the ordinances we have?
There are a couple enforcement issues, it's mostly little blight stuff and some ticky-tacky things between neighbors, but nothing new or exciting.
Okay. I did ask Paul in the planning consultant review to give us an update on some of these things, not to be a Gladys Kravitz or anything like that, but to, you know, how are our ordinances impacting people? And is it, you know, to try and be a little bit more proactive, you know, or to make a bad ordinance, God forbid, or something like that, you know? Or is there something that needs to be addressed due to a lack of? But I mean, I think we can make a rule for everything, we don't wanna do that, but just to kind of give an update of what's going on for the issues, if it's something that we need to be aware of. If it needs to occur, that's not our issue. Okay, approval of the minutes for March 18, 2024.
I make a motion to approve the draft minutes of March 18th, 2024 submitted.
I second it.
Public comment. Linda.
Do we,
The concern.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to do the rest of it. Just hold on one second. All those in favor of approving the minutes of March 18, 2024 as submitted, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Sorry.
You say you have all these people come in for informational training, but they're always one-sided. These alleged experts are self-proclaimed experts. They have an agenda. Their agenda is to have, it's very clear tonight, they want extremely restrictive zoning. The city of Ann Arbor doesn't have it because they've got a tremendous density in their community. And so they come to Salem because we're relatively rural. She's talking about 20,000 homes. Counting Northfield Crossing, we don't even have 3,000 homes right now. And so they come and they want to be very restrictive. There's no balance to what's being presented to you. And that's the danger of what's going on. Over and over again, you bring in these alleged experts that have an agenda. They present a very one-sided position. It's not balanced. I was taught when I went to school, information is gathering from all points of view and then making a decision. And I would encourage you, if that's truly what tonight was supposed to be, that we start to have more balanced presentations instead of just people that have an agenda. Thank you.
Okay. Chairperson comment. I agree with Linda. The only problem is I don't know who's gonna say either no rules or a bunch of rules. So I think the way Salem is, we tend to lead towards, we want less rules. So it's kind of like we just, I don't know. I wouldn't know where to start, but it's a good point, Linda.
I
Okay.
have a public comment, sorry.
Oh,
This is something that's been bugging me, Seth McGrath, for those that don't know me. This is something that's been bugging me for a little while now, and I was hoping it would be addressed before I had a chance to get around to it. But this planning commission is supposed to have a liaison to the Land Preservation Conservation Board, and it hasn't for the last years. So I would just encourage all of you to seriously consider stepping forward to be the liaison that shows up to those Tuesday monthly meetings, just to increase communication and collaboration between the two different units of government. Thanks.
Thank you.
are we required to have a liaison on?
It's within the
Okay.
ordinances, the ordinance language for the Land Preservation Conservation Board. Is it a requirement or is it
No.
encouraged?
It's permissible.
It's, yeah, it's
But
encouraged.
Well-
encourage her, we should
Yeah.
still consider it.
It'd be
So-
great, is what I'm
Bruce-
saying.
Bruce
I've
used to
been
be
a
that
couple
person.
times, and it was Bruce, and that's why Bruce comes here,
Mhm.
so.
But now Bruce is on the treasurer and not.
So basically what we're saying is we couldn't find anybody good enough to replace Bruce.
Yes.
Well, we'll take your second best.
All right. Oh, no. No, no. You know where I stand.
Any other public comment? Okay. Chairperson Guy already said it. We are adjourned at 9:13. Thank you.
That's plus and minus.
Oh, we have,